bam, 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 man. Yeah, what's cracking, everybody? What it do, man? So, EsseHomie, back at it again with another reaction. Today, we are going to go back to one of the YNs in Chicago. I guess he was a very popular dude. Every time somebody disrespected him, as they say, people are always paying the consequences. So, we're doing Young Pappy. So, yeah, here's my intro. Hit the subscribe button. Let me know what y'all think. All right, be right back. Don't go nowhere. Hit that subscribe button for your boy. It's your ass, homie. All right, man. Like always, I got my Red Bull. I got my Newports ready. Let's get into this video, man, and let's see what they talk about this Young Pappy. I heard about him. I watch a lot of Chicago videos, and Pappy's been coming on a lot, so I found this one, and we go get into it, man. Shout out to the dude that did this video, bro, for real. Hopefully, they don't hit me with something, you know? Let's get it. Every time they try to kill him, someone else died. Chirac's Young Pappy.
The street looking calm enough to hear your own footsteps when the sound of gunfire broke the silence and left a body on the pavement. Folks in Uptown woke up to flashing lights and police tape, and word started spreading before sunrise that it might be the same rapper who had dodged death twice before. The same rapper whose name kept showing up in police reports and rival crews' social media posts, and whose survival had already cost 2 other people their lives. By breakfast.
So this dude's been trying to get unalive for a good time, bro, but every time they do it, they miss, and he comes back with payback. God damn. If y'all see that happen, bro, don't even try to mess with them no more, man. If y'all they tried 2 times and it was unsuccessful, why y'all keep trying, bro? I mean, eventually somebody did, right? Because Sally, this youngster is gone. But man, Chicago rough out there, boy. You gotta keep your head on the swivel. You know what I'm saying? At all times, boy.
His name
Especially
was on
when you're
everybody's
beefing with
lips,
somebody.
but the story didn't start there. To understand how Shaquan Young Pappy Thomas ended up on that block, you have to go back to the very beginning. Shaquan Thomas came into the world on May 10th, 1995, in the far north of Chicago, in a neighborhood called Rogers Park, a place with tree-lined streets, old apartment buildings, and a mix of cultures that gave it energy but also tension. His mother, Ingrid Thomas, was raising him in a modest apartment, doing her best to keep him and his brothers on track, while his father stayed in nearby Edgewater, not far from the lake. Rogers Park was a long way from the South Side blocks most people think about when they talk about Chicago's gang wars.
See, man, I hate to say this shit, but it's facts, bro. Every child should have a man in that household. Regardless of the situation, regardless of what they're going through, man, there should always be a father figure that will step up to the plate and guide them the right way, man. Because every time and I hate to say this shit. I hate to say it, bro. But every time we see videos, it's a single mother's household that raises the youngsters, and the youngsters just doing all types of shit. That's why father figures should be in the homes, man. Even though a lot of people are like, nah, man, we women can raise, woo, woo, woo. But man, just look around, man. Every time there's always a single mother home, man.
But by the time Shaquan was growing up, it had its own map of dangerous corners and shifting lines. In the early 2010s, the North Side had smaller sets running their own beats, with crews claiming a few blocks and treating them like kingdoms. Rogers Park and nearby Uptown had an identity some locals called the North Pole, a name tied to being at the city's tip, but also claimed proudly by certain young crews. Among them was a group that would define much of Pappy's life, the Insane Cutthroat Gangsters, a branch of the Gangster Disciples. In January 2012, one of their members, nicknamed Pooh Bear, was killed, and the crew took on a new name in his memory, calling themselves PBG, short for Pooh Bear Gang. PBG wasn't a giant organization with hundreds of members. It was a tight circle of around 20 young men, mostly from the same streets, who treated each other like brothers. For Shaquan, it was family in more ways than one, since his older brother Ryan, better known later as Boo Double, was already part of it. His youngest brother Tavion, who would later go by Tay-Sav, was still a kid at that point, but looking up to his older siblings and soaking in everything they did. From the jump, Shaquan had music in him. Family members said he was rapping by age 4, learning from Ryan, who was already playing with rhymes and beats. By the time Shaquan was 12, he was confident enough to freestyle on camera, and a grainy 2007 clip of him doing exactly that would resurface years later, showing the beginnings of the rapid, unpredictable flow he became known for, around his grandmother, who gave him the nickname.
That's how that one dude from Dipset wears his bandana on top of his head. That's what it reminded me of, you know what I mean? What's his name, man? I forgot the dude's name, but you know what I'm talking about? When the Dipset, he had the bandana on his head. He just let it put up to like a hat. That's what it reminded me of.
Pappy, he was just another grandson. Around his friends, he was the kid who could spit clever lines without breaking a sweat. His mother, Ingrid, would later say the young Pappy persona wasn't the real Shaquan, but a mask he wore to survive the streets he was moving through. She believed he learned early that looking soft in Rogers Park or Uptown could get you picked on, or worse. And the tough, armed, ready for anything image was a way of telling people not to mess with him. Still, it's hard to live inside a mask without it becoming part of you. And as Shaquan got older, the line between the act and his real self started to blur. By middle school, trouble had already found him. There was the time he got caught with marijuana at school, a turning point that almost got him expelled until his mother fought to keep him enrolled. He picked up small charges here and there, disorderly conduct, curfew violations, little fights that landed him in juvenile detention for short stints. Ingrid felt the system wasn't doing much to help him. They'd release him back into the same environment without giving him tools to change it. And outside, that environment was already pulling him toward the street life.
See, that should have been the father's role right there. You know what I mean? Not the system. That should have been the father's role. That's what I'm saying, man. Fathers need to be involved in the kids' lives, bro. Unless the father's deceased, locked up, there has to be a man that's going to step up and take that mantle as a father figure to these youngsters that have no fathers in their homes, man.
That was rising alongside the drill music wave, sweeping the city. Shaquan was smart, talented, and restless, and in Rogers Park, that mix could either build you or break you. The next few years would show just how far both paths could go when they're running side by side. By the time Shaquan was moving into his late teens, Chicago was already deep in the sound of drill music, and the city's underground was shifting with that wave. Chief Keef had dropped I Don't Like and put a spotlight on the South Side, while names like Lil Durk and G Herbo were building their own lanes, and that raw street energy was moving through neighborhoods far from where it started. In Rogers Park, young Pappy was building something that felt like the North Pole version of that movement, drawing from his own blocks and his own crew. Pappy had a way of rapping that stuck with you, switching up patterns mid-verse and then landing back on the beat like he never left it, and the way he carried his words had a natural bite to it. His energy on the mic made every bar sound urgent, and when you paired that with his blunt lyrics, it came across like a direct message to whoever was listening. There was no holding back in what he said, and that made the songs hit harder for his listeners. By 2013 and 2014, his music was moving fast on YouTube and SoundCloud, with tracks like Killa and Homicide turning into anthems for PBG. The videos weren't studio polished. They showed him outside with the crew throwing signs, naming names, and making it known exactly who they were talking about. The circle stayed tight in those visuals, with Boo Double playing the big brother role on tracks, and in the streets, Bang Da Hitta adding his own intensity, Lil Sean showing up as a regular voice, and PBG Spaz holding his spot in the lineup. The music connected with people, but the way Pappy and his crew used social media turned it into something bigger. YouTube views climbed into the thousands quickly, and clips spread on Facebook and Twitter, where people either backed him up or took shots at him. That constant back and forth online became part of the scene, with Pappy engaged.
I think that's what really hyped up the beef in Chicago or anywhere in the States, to be honest with you. Social media. Social media was, I think that shit was the big influence of a lot of the beef that's going on in the world right now. Because people don't live close by to each other, you know what I mean? They don't be dissing each other unless they're on social media, you know, saying whatever they want to say, and then when they meet up, it's already escalated because of the social shit.
In what police later called cyberbanging, his posts and videos sometimes named rival crews like Lock City or Hula Gang directly, clowning them for missing their targets, which brought more eyes to his pages and more attention to the streets. In Chicago's climate at the time, those online words didn't stay online for long. Screenshots of posts and comments circulated through group chats, and crews took them as challenges to be answered in person. For Pappy, each post was both promotion and provocation, and police began to track his online activity closely. They argued that it was part of what kept violence flaring, pointing to his exchanges with rivals as examples. Even as his music picked up more attention, legal trouble kept slowing him down. His record filled with misdemeanors, and officers on the north side knew his face well enough to pull him over or stop him on sight. Some charges stuck, Others fell apart, but every time it happened, it pulled him out of the studio and into courtrooms. People managing him said it was hard to keep him focused on recording for long stretches because something on the street or another police run-in would pull him away. That constant push and pull shaped his rise in real time. The music gave him an escape and a platform, but the street still had a hold on him, and his crew's loyalty meant his name stayed tied to everything PBG did. For Pappy, every verse was a way to tell their story, to mark their place on the map, and to send a message to rivals. Each release had the potential to open new opportunities, but it also brought fresh attention from people looking for him offline, making his climb as risky as it was fast. In Chicago's North Side street politics, beef wasn't always clean lines of one nation against another, and Pappy's world was proof of that. The North Side gangs carried long histories and deep grudges, but their rivalries could turn in ways that made even alliances inside the same nation break apart. You had moments where a folk nation set would be at war with another folk set, and that meant GDs
Chicago
going at
drill
GDs
scene, bro.
while
They
still
started
keeping
drilling now.
animosity
They
toward rival nations alive.
always on
Rogers
it now.
Park was locked in its own set of conflicts, and PBG was in the middle of almost all of them. The main enemies for PBG during Pappy's rise were the conservative vice lords, the Black P Stones, Lock City, and Hula Gang. Each name carried its own weight, and each brought a different history to the fight. The conservative vice lords had a presence in the Uptown and West Side areas, with connections and alliances that stretched into other neighborhoods. The Black P Stones had been one of Chicago's most established and feared groups since the late 1960s, and their North Side members were not disconnected from the bigger structure. Lock City, which claimed territory near Howard Street, was especially close to PBG in geography, which meant the chances for run-ins were high. Hula Gang, claiming from the area around Magnolia and Sunnyside, also shared that North Side proximity, and their name would keep coming up in some of the city's ugliest headlines. The violence wasn't just about territorial boundaries, it was also about personal losses. In 2012, the murder of Pooh Bear, the young member whose name inspired the Pooh Bear gang identity, cut deep into PBG. Pooh Bear's real name was Shaquille Tony, and he was shot and killed in the 1400 block of Westland Avenue in Rogers Park.
And bro, and with these youngsters getting alive, man, it's crazy because they don't just get 1-2 hits. They get 13, 14 headshots. You know what I mean? Like, look at that one dude, Shooter Shells. He got hit like, what did it say? Like 20 something times in his face. And I saw a picture. I was like, damn. These youngsters ain't just shooting you 1-2 times, bro. If they really want to, they're gonna go to stand on top of you and just let go of that fucking Draco or AK, whatever the hell they have, the assault rifle type shit. I mean, they unloading into the face, bro. They crazy, man. No souls out there.
His death was blamed on rival gang members, and for PBG, that wasn't something to just be remembered. It was something to be answered. From that point, the back and forth with their enemies was fueled by something heavier than just bragging rights. Pooh Bear's killing became one of the key turning points for Pappy personally, because it wasn't just the loss of a friend. It was the loss of someone whose name was tied to the identity they carried in every song and video. In his tracks, Pappy kept Pooh Bear's name alive, and in the streets, the crew made sure the rivals knew the score was still open. That loss deepened the blood feud with groups like Lock City and Hula Gang, who were viewed not only as competitors, but as enemies to be publicly humiliated. Pappy had a habit of turning that humiliation into public entertainment, and that was where his style became dangerous. He would go on social media or drop lyrics in a track that mocked the aim of his rivals, clowning them for missing shots or freezing up when they had a chance. These weren't coded disses. They were direct with names, locations, and incidents woven into the lines. In the North Side drill scene, that kind of taunting didn't just build buzz, it turned the temperature up in real life. For example, after surviving one attempt on his life that left a bystander dead, Pappy went online with a laugh about how the shooters couldn't hit their target. The post would get shared and reposted, drawing reactions from both supporters and enemies, and in some cases, even family members of the people he mocked. That cycle of public disrespect made it nearly impossible for tensions to cool down, because every video or status update was like throwing fuel on a fire that was already burning. The Chicago Police Department began referring to this as technological kerosene, because the internet was acting like an accelerant for violence. Officers working gang units said they could watch disputes escalate in real time through Facebook posts, YouTube comments, and Instagram stories.
And still
in
don't
their
have no
view,
evidence
the
to
music
get them when they
videos
get
and
them.
online taunts were directly tied to the shootings that followed. And in Pappy's case, they had multiple incidents where a video went up and a retaliatory attack happened days or even hours later. Hula Gang, in particular, was on the receiving end of a lot of Pappy's public shots. They were based in Uptown, and their members had already been in back and forth conflicts with PBG over various street incidents. The way Pappy spoke spoke on them in his songs, made those issues public record, and their members responded in kind. Lock City faced the same treatment, with their name coming up in tracks that circulated well beyond the North Side. It wasn't uncommon for these crews to be in the comments under each other's videos, trading insults and threats for everyone to see. The rivalry with the conservative vice lords was shaped by both direct encounters and the broader politics of Chicago gangs. CVLs on the North Side often found themselves in situations where alliances and beefs overlapped, meaning they could be aligned with one group against PBG, but have their own separate issues elsewhere. With PBG, the main friction points were street-level run-ins and the way members would call each other out online. That constant stream of public jabs meant that even small disputes had the potential to spiral quickly. Black Peace Stones had history that went deeper, and while their North Side presence wasn't as large as in some South Side neighborhoods, they had individuals who were respected and connected. Clashes with PBG members often took place in neutral zones like bus stops, parks, or outside convenience stores, where a chance encounter could turn into a fight or shooting.
Is that their symbol? They throw the 5 fingers up, the 5-pointed star? That's why they throw them all just their hands up like that?
Moments would then find their way into lyrics, creating another loop of music feeding the beat. From 2013 onward, these rivalries became inseparable from Pappy's identity as an artist. Fans who didn't know the full details of the street politics could still pick up on the fact that he was speaking directly to people, and in the drill scene, that authenticity was part of the appeal. The danger was that for every person impressed by the boldness, there was someone else taking it as a personal challenge. The violence tied to these rivalries didn't just touch those involved.
Damn, they got game apps everywhere, bro. These fucking game apps everywhere.
It spilled over into the lives of bystanders. Innocent people were caught in crossfire, and the neighborhood tension meant that anyone moving through certain blocks had to be aware of what colors or faces they might be seen with. In interviews, Pappy's own family members talked about the constant anxiety of knowing he was a target, and that the people targeting him might not care who else was in the way. Even as the danger grew, Pappy leaned into the role of the outspoken frontman for PBG. He wasn't just dropping music for the sake of a career. He was using every track to talk his talk and let rivals know exactly where he stood. For police and community leaders, that made him a prime example of how the drill music scene and street conflicts were feeding each other. For his fans, it made him one of the most authentic voices out of the North Side. Someone who lived and rapped without a filter. These rivalries would define the next few years of Pappy's life, setting the stage for multiple attempts on him and shaping the way the city remembered his name. Every shout out, every diss, and every reference in a verse became part of a larger story that was being written in both music and violence, and the ending was still far from sight. The winter air in Rogers Park carried that sharp bite that froze fingertips before you even stepped into the street, and on that February night in 2014, the sidewalks near the McDonald's on Howard Street were slick with patches of old ice.
Is like a dangerous spot out there, bro.
Most people hurried between the bus stop and their front doors. But for young Pappy and his close friend Markeo Carr, the pull of late night food and conversation outweighed the cold. They had been hanging out, moving between familiar spots in the neighborhood when they decided.
Oh, it's 7:30? The sun's down? Yeah, that McNugget could wait till tomorrow, bro. Shit, y'all know how I go out there. I might go out there just to get a goddamn McNugget and not ever come back. And I'm a bystander. Shit, us bystanders get hit more than the targets do, so yeah, that McNugget could wait till tomorrow. I'm cool.
Decided to slide over to the McDonald's lot, a place where people from different blocks sometimes cross paths. Pappy was already building his name in the drill scene, and his presence around the neighborhood was anything but low-key. He rolled with an energy that made people notice, but it also made him a magnet for attention he didn't want. Markeo, 19 years old, was one of those friends who had known him well before the music videos and the growing buzz. Their bond went back to days when they were just kids in Rogers Park, long before the beefs got so public and the stakes so high. That night, the glow from the McDonald's sign lit up the lot in a pale yellow. The snow piled in messy ridges against the curbs. The sound of the drive-through speaker cut through the air every few minutes, mixing with the occasional blast of music from passing cars. People inside were talking over trays of fries, and outside a small group lingered near the entrance, huddled in jackets and hoodies. Pappy and Markeo weren't inside long before they decided to step back out, leaning against the cold metal of a car as they talked. It happened fast. A figure in dark clothing moved toward the lot, their face hidden behind a mask. The only thing visible was the shape of the gun as the shooter raised it and opened fire. The sound cracked through the cold, bullets snapping past metal and glass. In those chaotic seconds, people dove for cover, some hitting the ground, others scrambling toward the building. Markeo took the brunt of it, hit multiple times before he could even move away from the car. 3 others, including Pappy, were struck as the shooter kept firing, the rounds tearing into the stillness of the night. Pappy caught a bullet in the arm, the pain immediate and sharp, But it wasn't enough to drop him. He scrambled for safety, moving toward the building with his arm clutched tight, the cold air burning against the wound. The shooter disappeared as quickly as they had come, vanishing into the streets beyond the glow of the lot. When the police arrived, the lot was a mess of shattered glass, blood on the pavement, and the sound of sirens bouncing off the surrounding buildings. Paramedics worked quickly, but for Markeo, the wounds were too severe. He was pronounced dead not long after, leaving PBG without one of their own, and Pappy without a friend he had grown up alongside. The news traveled fast, hitting phones and social media before.
And that, how do these people feel though? Like, you know what I mean? Like the rappers and shit. Like, you know what I mean? How they be rapping this and blah 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 blah. And if they can't get them, they go get their close ones, and then they do get them. How do these people feel? Because they're the ones that are instigating this beef, making this beef deeper than what it is, and whoop, whoop, whoop. And they're not the ones that get unalive, but it's somebody that they're really really close to. Like for this example, this his homie that he grew up with. I mean, how does it feel like knowing that you made the beef that deep, like that you got that much hatred towards you guys because of what you're saying in your music? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do they feel afterwards, bro?
The police even cleared the scene. PBG members started showing up, some in disbelief, others already talking about revenge. In the days that followed, the neighborhood was heavy with tension. The funeral brought together friends, family, and members of allied crews, all standing under the weight of another loss in a city already carrying too many. For Pappy, the anger was sharper than the pain in his arm. He wasn't just dealing with the loss of Markeo, he was watching how the media was talking about it. News reports focused on gang connections and violent patterns, painting the scene as another statistic in Chicago's cycle of shootings. To him, it felt like they were erasing the person Markeo had been, reducing him to just another headline.
I need to get this goddamn... I ain't gonna pay for this shit though, man.
Police were already calling the situation another example of what they had started referring to as technological kerosene, their term for how social media was fueling real-life violence. They believed the shooting was tied to the online back and forth between PBG and rival crews, and to them, it was just the latest flare-up in a feud that had been simmering for years. They warned that more was likely to come, both to Pappy directly and to the neighborhood as a whole. Not long after the funeral, Pappy found himself in more legal trouble. An arrest for reckless conduct landed him in jail for a stretch, pulling him out of the streets but not out of the headlines. Inside, he heard about the shifts happening outside. Friends watching their backs more closely, rivals posting thinly veiled taunts online, and the streets heating up again. His time in jail didn't slow the tensions. If anything, it gave people more reason to speculate on what would happen when he got out. The McDonald's shooting wasn't just another incident in the list of attempts on Pappy's life. It was a moment that deepened every line in the sand. It showed how quickly a public space could turn into a shooting gallery, how the beefs that lived online could explode without warning, and how each loss pulled the neighborhood deeper into a cycle that seemed impossible to break. For PBG, it was a call to stand closer together, even as they knew it made them a bigger target. On July 12th, 2014, Shaquan Young Pappy Thomas stepped out into that daylight carrying the weight of both his growing notoriety and the danger that came with it. He was in the vicinity of Devon Avenue, a strip that ran through the neighborhood with its mix of small businesses, bus stops, and foot traffic. The time of day and the openness of the area didn't change the fact that his name had been sitting high on certain people's lists. Somewhere nearby, a member of the conservative vice lords named Eric Vaughn spotted Pappy. Vaughn had history in the North Side's network of rivalries, and the connection between his crew and the young shooters who would soon enter the picture was not just casual street chatter. It was part of the chain of alliances and retaliations that shaped much of the violence uptown. Vaughn didn't move alone in this situation. He had two teenage affiliates with him, Denzel Burke, just 18, and Michael Phillips, who was 17. These weren't outsiders. They were products of the same ecosystem of grudges, gang lines, and proving oneself. Witness accounts later painted the image of Vaughn.
Man, a lot of these youngsters, bro, they're just going along just to show they're not weak. No, they're not scared. They with it. And look what happens, bro. They get locked up. Peer pressure's a motherfucker, man.
On making the call, signaling Burke and Phillips toward the opportunity. The teens took off after Pappy, armed and ready to make their names known in the streets. As Pappy moved down the sidewalk, the chase began, and the stillness of that corner snapped into chaos. Burke and Phillips closed the distance, pulling out their weapons in plain daylight. The street didn't give them cover, but it didn't matter. They were locked in. The first shots cracked in the air, echoing off the brick facades and scattering pedestrians into doorways and behind parked cars. Pappy ran, moving with the desperation of someone who'd seen this play out before, his mind working to calculate distance, corners, and escape routes. Vaughn stayed back as the two teens pushed forward, letting them do the work that could cement his own street standing without putting himself directly on the trigger. 10 rounds went out in those moments, each one sending more people into cover and sending shockwaves through the immediate area. None of them hit Pappy. Not one bullet connected with its intended target, but the street rarely allows for misses to pass without consequence. One of those stray rounds traveled farther than the shooters intended, striking 28-year-old Will Lewis. Lewis wasn't from the streets. He was a photographer, a man building a life with his fiancée, planning to start a family. He had been standing near a bus stop, caught entirely outside of the conflict, and that single bullet ended his life. Lewis's death brought a new kind of attention to the already bloody atmosphere surrounding young Pappy. It wasn't just gang members in danger, it was anyone within range of the violence. The presence of an innocent victim pushed the incident beyond local beef and into the headlines.
I was like, he only like 14 years old, man.
Alderman Joe Moore, who represented the 49th Ward, later told reporters he had seen part of the chase. Moore described watching a man with a gun running after another man, details that only deepened the shock among residents that this was unfolding in the middle of a busy street during the day. Within hours, police were piecing together the information from witnesses, camera footage, and their own gang intelligence. Vaughn, Burke, and Phillips didn't stay ghosts for long. In the weeks that followed, all three would be arrested and charged in connection to the murder of Will Lewis. For Vaughn, already tied to gang activity, the case stacked more weight onto his record. For Burke and Phillips, their ages became...
I won't be surprised, man, and you know, we're in 2025 right now, and they're still doing that, man. Pedestrians are getting, you know what I mean, unalive because they can't hit their target. I won't be surprised, man, when bystanders are getting tired of this shit and they start shooting back at the attackers. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what they need to do, man. Like, man, they see the youngsters shooting at somebody, man. Pedestrians out there, man, get your guns out and just, you know, return fire, bro. Like, cause they don't care about killing y'all, so why should you know what I mean? That's how I feel sometimes. Like, if somebody's shooting at somebody by me and bullets are going through me, like in my direction, I'm busting back. You ain't gonna unlike me or my family, brother. I'm busting back big time. Feel me? Shit, boy, yeah, I carry mine.
A talking point in the larger conversation about how young some shooters were in Chicago's gang conflicts. The arrest didn't erase the fear left behind on Devon Avenue. Residents who had lived through years of street politics knew this was part of a cycle, one that didn't stop just because someone was taken off the street. For them, the knowledge that an innocent man had been killed while waiting for a bus was a proof that the violence wasn't confined to any one block or one crew's enemies. Conversations in barbershops, corner stores, and front stoops circled back to the same point. If something could go down like that in the open, nobody was untouchable. For Pappy, the Devon Avenue shooting was both a narrow escape and another confirmation of how many people wanted him gone. It reinforced the tension that had been shaping his daily life since the McDonald's shooting months earlier. He didn't slow down on his music or his presence online. In some ways, the incident seemed to add to his persona, giving his supporters more reason to see him as someone who kept surviving while the odds stacked higher. But the other side of that reality was a community left picking up the pieces after another public shooting, another body lost, and more young men staring down decades in prison. The police called social media the technological kerosene on these flames. They had been tracking the online exchanges between PBG and their rivals for months, watching as taunts turned into plans and posts became intelligence. In the Devon Avenue case, the detectives saw it as an extension of that same cycle. The names and faces might shift, but the way the violence unfolded had a pattern: spot, chase, shoot, and deal with the fallout later. Even with arrests made, the incident lived on in both the streets and the digital space. Videos, news clips, and screenshots of the day's events spread online, each share keeping the memory alive and reminding anyone watching that the beef was still active. The loss of Will Lewis became part of that history, both as a tragedy in its own right and as a symbol of the danger surrounding young Pappy's world. That summer, Rogers Park residents carried on with their lives under a shadow that felt heavier. Parents walked their kids home a little faster. Shop owners kept their eyes on the door more often. And for those in PBG, the Devon Avenue shooting joined the list of reasons why every day outside came with decisions about where to be, who to roll with, and how quickly they could move if the wrong car turned the corner. By early 2015, Shaquan Thomas was no longer just a local name inside Rogers Park. His reputation was spilling into other parts of Chicago. And for the police, that meant his file was getting thicker by the week. They already had a record of his run-ins going back to his mid-teens. And by this point, it showed 11 misdemeanors and a felony, the latter tied to a 2013 gun charge, where officers claimed they caught him with an illegal firearm. For the police, this was proof that he was both armed and active. For Pappy and his people, it was just another example of how carrying a gun in their neighborhood was less about choice and more about survival. The increased spotlight on Pappy wasn't only because of his music videos or online presence, it was also because every time there was a shooting involving PBG, his name was somewhere in the conversation, whether he was actually there or not. That type of notoriety made him a high priority target for CPD's gang units. Detectives, tactical teams, and even SWAT started keeping tabs on where he moved, who he hung around, and what events he was planning. In the city's official view, removing him from the streets was part of preventing another headline. One of the biggest moments that showed just how far police were willing to go happened in May 2015, at what was supposed to be a night of celebration for Pappy's latest mixtape release. The event was held in a rented space, with word spreading through social media and local flyers, and for his supporters, it was meant to be a chance to enjoy the music without the drama of the streets. But as the night went on, squads of uniformed officers...
That shit would have never happened, bro. Regardless, if he wanted just to be a nice, cool mixtape party, your enemies, you have flyers out there showing location, time, and all that. Ain't no damn well that's gonna be a safe environment to go to, man. For real. I would just step back and listen to him on the computer type shit. I'm gonna wait till his mixtapes out. I'm gonna go listen to that shit. I ain't gonna get shot. Just go party. Go out there and don't come back home. Not me.
And heavily armed SWAT members moved in. The raid was quick and overwhelming, with police lining people against walls, searching bags, and handcuffing dozens on site. By the time it was over, 33 people had been arrested. Charges ranged from outstanding warrants to possession of controlled substances. But it was clear that the main point was to disrupt the event entirely. To many who were there, it felt like an ambush meant to send a message that Pappy couldn't gather a crowd without law enforcement showing up. For his mother, Ingrid, the raid was personal. She spoke openly afterward about how she believed the police were targeting her son specifically, using every opportunity.
That or shit, they could have saved your son's life that night. You never know. His life would have probably ended that night. I mean, but they did that and took him in and survived a couple more months. I don't know how, you know what I mean, but that day somebody was probably planning to unalive him. You never know, man. You can't blame the cops for everything. Shit, you know your kid's doing some crazy shit. You know what I mean? What you expect was gonna happen? Just let it go? Nah, man. If my son was doing stupid shit, and if I could control him, he's on the streets doing stupid shit, and I'm knowing he's doing stupid shit, cops get him doing stupid shit, you go in jail for doing stupid shit. Feel me? Don't do stupid shit. But that's just me, man. As a parent, if my son doing some shit like that, I'm gonna be on his ass.
To drag him into custody or scatter the people around him. That tension wasn't just between Pappy and the police. It was felt across Uptown and Rogers Park. The neighborhoods were in a fragile state. Gang rivalries got shot up, and a lot of people would have been on the line. Shootings were happening in quick bursts, and residents who weren't part of the street life still found themselves ducking bullets or avoiding certain blocks. In that climate, Pappy's rising fame acted like a lightning rod. He attracted attention from supporters, enemies, and the police, often all at the same time. Inside PBG, there were voices trying to steer him away from the cycle. Friends and collaborators pushed him to focus fully on music, arguing that he had a real shot at making it out. They pointed to his growing YouTube numbers, the respect he had from other artists, and the way his name carried weight outside the North Side. To them, the problem wasn't his talent, it was that he couldn't leave the streets alone long enough to let the music work for him. But walking away from that life wasn't as simple as picking a new route home. Every diss track, every online taunt, and every public appearance kept the beefs alive. And for someone like Pappy, whose music thrived on authenticity, staying quiet or invisible wasn't in the plan. Even as the police pressure mounted, he doubled down on showing up in his videos with his crew, making music that called out rival sets by name, and refusing to hide in the background. The city, meanwhile, was treating him as both a public safety threat and a potential flashpoint. Intelligence reports passed between gang units painted a picture of an artist whose lyrics were directly tied to ongoing conflicts, and every new song was dissected for clues about upcoming retaliation. When police brass talked about using technological kerosene to describe how social media escalated violence, they were talking about situations exactly like Pappy's. The summer of 2015 was shaping up to be critical. The violence in the neighborhoods wasn't slowing down.
You may think that an adult that can't stop watching the P word looks something like this, but this is what they really look.
And the gap between what the streets wanted from Pappy and what the system wanted for him was growing wider. To his crew, the music was supposed to be the way out. To law enforcement, it was just another reason to keep him under the microscope. By the time May 2015 came around, Pappy had been living with a target on his back for years, and in those last few weeks, it felt like that target was glowing. The streets in Uptown and Rogers Park were tense, with crews on edge and Pappy's name still hot in conversations, police briefings, and social media arguments. The buzz from his recent music kept him in rotation online, but the same attention that fueled his rise was pulling more eyes onto him from people who wanted him gone. On May 21st, 2015, Pappy dropped what would be one of his final releases, the track Shooters featuring Lil Sean. The beat hit with the kind of energy drill fans expected from him, but it was the content that stood out. The song was more than just a street anthem. It was a direct shot at his enemies, layered with name drops, sly references, and open taunts about their inability to hit their targets. He mocked their aim, bringing up past situations where bullets flew but missed, and the hook made it clear that he saw himself as someone his rivals couldn't touch. The video for Shooters showed Pappy in familiar territory, posted with his crew, repping PBG alongside Lil Sean, who had become one of his consistent collaborators. They flashed signs, rapped straight into the camera with that mix of confidence and defiance, and sent out more of the same coded and uncoded messages that had long been part of their music. For fans, it was another reminder of why Pappy was considered one of the most fearless on the North Side. For rivals, it was another reason to try to prove him wrong. The release came with more than just the music. Around that time, Pappy was still active on social media, posting the same blend of music promotion, casual moments, and cryptic lines. One post in particular stuck with people after the fact. Everything ain't what it seemed. At the time, it was just another short update to his followers, but in hindsight, friends and locals looked back at it as a sign that he might have been feeling the pressure more than he showed. Pappy had always been known for his charisma and his ability to stay composed in situations where most people would be looking over their shoulders. That cool exterior didn't mean he was oblivious to the danger. People close to him said that he knew he had enemies waiting for any chance to catch him slipping, and the fact that he had already survived 2 attempts only made him more aware that the next time could be different. In the neighborhood, conversations were shifting from whether something would happen to when it would happen. Friends described the atmosphere as tense, but not surprising, saying that Pappy's style of calling out enemies by name and mocking them in public had made retaliation almost inevitable. Even people who weren't involved in the beefs directly could sense that the air felt heavier when he was around. The Shooters video, with its unfiltered shots at rivals, didn't cool anything down. If anything, it poured more fuel onto a fire that had been burning for years. Some of his boys told him to focus on the music and stay off the streets, to let the buzz from the track carry him into the next project. They wanted to see him in the studio, not outside where the wrong person could pull up. But for Pappy, the streets and the music were connected, and pulling away from one felt like pulling away from the other. In those final weeks, it wasn't just rivals and friends watching him closely. The police still saw him as a key figure in an ongoing cycle of violence, someone whose presence could trigger a chain reaction. They had already made multiple attempts to keep him off the streets, and every new video, every public appearance, and every social media post was another reason for them to keep tabs on his movements. Despite that pressure, Pappy was still moving through his routines, still recording, still linking up with his crew. The Shooters release gave him more momentum online, and fans were talking about it heavy, breaking down lyrics, sharing the video, and quoting the most aggressive lines. But in Chicago, especially in that era of drill, a track that hit that hard was never just entertainment. It was part of the larger conversation in the streets. For some, Shooters was a final statement of who Pappy was, unapologetic, fearless, and willing to say what most wouldn't. For others, it was the sound of someone playing a dangerous game too close to the edge. In either case, it became one of the last pieces of work that people would point to when they talked about his legacy, a track that captured both the talent and the risks that defined his career. Those who were close to him would later say that they could feel the tension building in the days after the video dropped, even if they couldn't put it into words at the time. In Uptown and Rogers Park, there were always whispers, always people moving differently when something was about to happen. And in the weeks after Shooters, those whispers got louder. It was just after 1:30 in the morning when Shaquan Young Pappy Thomas was walking along the 4800 block of North Kenmore Avenue, not far from where he had spent much of his life moving between Uptown and Rogers Park. According to witnesses, the street was quiet enough that the sound of footsteps carried. Somebody came up from behind, not fast and loud like in a chase, quiet, steady, closing in. Then 2 shots cracked the night. One hit Pappy in the back, another tore through him before he could even turn around. A neighbor said they heard a car, dark, possibly black, speed off just seconds later. By the time first responders got to him, Pappy was fighting to breathe, bleeding out on the sidewalk. He was pronounced dead at Advocate Illinois Masonic Medical Center at 2:04 a.m. Within minutes, phones lit up across the North Side. Some were calls between family and friends, trying to confirm what they just heard. Others were rivals passing around the news like a trophy. On social media, posts popped up from known enemies mocking his death, while PBG members posted messages of disbelief and rage. In the streets, the question wasn't if someone did it, it was who and whether it had been a straight-up op or something far messier. The most explosive theory didn't point to a rival gang at all, it pointed inward. The streets started whispering almost immediately that Pappy might have been backdoored, set up by somebody close enough to know his movements that night. Inside setups weren't new in Chicago gang politics, and for someone like Pappy, who had made enemies on every corner, trust was already in short supply. But this theory had weight because of who could have had the right combination of knowledge and access. People pointed to certain PBG affiliates who'd had disagreements with him in the months before his death. Some claimed that there were tensions over money from music. Others said it was over respect, or the lack of it inside the crew. Names like PBG, Spaz, and Lil Sean were never officially tied to anything in police reports, but in street talk, they were mentioned alongside others who were in Pappy's circle that spring. One rumor said a female acquaintance linked both to Pappy and to one of his rivals might have lured him to that block. Another story had it that a PBG associate had been playing both sides, trading information with enemies for personal gain or safety. What made this believable to some was how clean the hit was. This wasn't the wild spray everything shooting style that had marked earlier attempts on his life. Whoever did it got close enough to fire accurately and then disappear without hitting anyone else. It had the feel of someone knowing where he'd be and when, which meant the shooter didn't have to search the neighborhood, they just had to show up. Adding fuel was the fact that Pappy had posted cryptic lines in the weeks before, like, everything ain't what it seemed, and friends recalled him saying he was watching who he trusted. Whether that was paranoia from constant beef or a sign he knew something was coming, nobody could say for sure. But for those who believed in the backdoor theory, those words looked like a warning he couldn't act on fast enough. If you followed the history, this was the most obvious suspect list. The conservative vice lords had been after Pappy since at least the Devon Avenue shooting in July 2014, when CVL member Eric Vaughn spotted him in daylight and set two teen shooters, Denzel Burke and Michael Phillips, on him. They chased Pappy down the street, firing 10 rounds, missing him entirely, but killing 28-year-old photographer Will Lewis with a stray bullet. That murder had brought massive media coverage and made Pappy's name even hotter with police. The Vaughn-Burke-Phillips arrests didn't erase the CVL grudge. In fact, the street view was that it made it worse. Vaughn was already facing charges from other shootings, and word was that losing Pappy that day had been a major embarrassment. For a crew that prided itself on its reach, missing a target that publicly mocked their aim was a hit to their reputation. Pappy didn't help matters. After that incident, he went harder with the taunts, both in music and online. In Shooters and other tracks, he made references to his rival's bad aim, doubling down on insults that the CVLs took personally. Social media posts weren't subtle. There were direct name drops and laughing emojis, pictures of him in rival territory, captions daring them to try again. The Uptown Hit style also fit the CVL profile in some people's minds. Two clean shots from behind, no stray rounds hitting random bystanders this time. It looked like a correction of the Devon Avenue mess. And Uptown wasn't CVL territory, but it was close enough to reach with a quick in and out run, especially for a crew that had been tracking him for months. The car witnesses mentioned a black sedan, matched descriptions seen in past CVL-linked shootings on the north side. While police never confirmed a match, Street Talk said the same type of vehicle had been spotted on surveillance after other Vice Lord missions. The Black P Stones, particularly sets tied to the north side, were another name in the mix. While the Stones and PBG weren't in a constant back and forth, like with the CVLs, there had been crossovers and flare-ups. Some of this dated back to the death of Pooh Bear, a close friend of Pappy and namesake for the Pooh Bear gang. The killing had deepened multiple beef lines, and some said certain P Stone members had either been involved or had aligned themselves with the killers. Pappy's lyrics often took aim at the Stones when he mentioned the North Side's gang scene. In videos, he had been seen in areas close to Stone territory, throwing up PBG signs and calling out their crews directly to the Stones, especially those with long memories of neighborhood wars. That was enough to keep him on the list. There was also the factor of mutual allies turning into enemies. Some individuals who had once moved between PBG and Stone circles without drama found themselves forced to pick sides as tensions grew. In that split, grudges formed that weren't always public, making a targeted hit possible without it being obvious from the outside. While the Stones didn't have as high profile a failed attempt on Pappy as the CVLs did, the theory here leaned on the idea of quiet patience. They let other crews take the spotlight while waiting for a moment when the heat was lower, then sent someone in to make it quick. The low round count and execution style approach on Kenmore Avenue fit that possibility, especially if it was done by someone who didn't want to draw the same kind of police swarm that followed the Devon Avenue chaos. Lock City and Hula Gang were two names that didn't dominate headlines the way CVL's or Stone's did, but in the local beef web, they had weight. Both operated in areas that had seen run-ins with PBG, and both had members who'd been mentioned in diss tracks or online spats. Lock City, with its roots tied to certain conservative Vice Lord networks, had indirect ties to the Devon Avenue shooting fallout. Some of their younger members were said to have run with or assisted CVL shooters in spotting targets. Hula Gang, based out of the West Rogers Park and Uptown border area, had their own set of conflicts, smaller, more personal, but still heated. Pappy had mocked them on occasion, lumping them in with all the ops on the north. The theory here wasn't about an old headline-grabbing beef, but rather a fresh opportunity. Both Lock City and Hula Gang had members who moved quietly, not posting much online, not taking the bait in public. That made them dangerous in a different way. If they wanted Pappy gone, they could have coordinated with a small circle. That made had members who headline-grabbing beef, but rather a fresh opportunity. Both Lock City and Hula Gang had members who moved quietly, not posting much online, not taking the bait in public. That made them dangerous in a different way. If they wanted Pappy gone, they could have coordinated with a small circle, avoided the messy bravado, and handled it in a clean, surgical manner, much like the Kenmore Avenue hit ended up being. Street talk after the murder included a few whispered names from these sets. Not enough for police to act on, but enough for people in the know to side-eye certain corners for weeks afterward. The overlap between Lock City, Hula-affiliated members, and CVL allies made it even harder to pin down who, if anyone from these crews, had a hand in it. The deepest, most uncomfortable conversations didn't happen on social media. They happened in private, between people who'd known Pappy since he was a kid, and those conversations sometimes landed on names nobody outside the circle would expect. The inside setup theory had already touched on this, but some people expanded it to include even more possibilities. PBG was tight, but it wasn't immune to fractures. There had been talk of disputes over music money. Who was funding what? Who was profiting? Who was owed? A few members reportedly felt like Pappy's growing fame was outpacing the group's overall benefit, especially with police heat constantly circling their blocks because of him. One whispered suspect was a guy Pappy had grown up with, but had recently stopped hanging with as much. Another was someone who'd been in the room for tense arguments about how shows and music videos were being run. Even some of the younger affiliates, hungry for clout and eager to prove themselves, were said to have been reckless with information, talking too much in front of people who weren't really family. There was also the uncomfortable possibility that a friend's associate, not a PBG member directly, but someone who was around enough to blend in, could have been the leak. In that case, the killer might have been a hired hand from outside the immediate beef lines, someone brought in just to execute the hit and vanish. This theory was the hardest for people who loved Pappy to swallow, because it meant the danger didn't come from blocks away. It might have been sitting right next to him in a studio or a car. By the time the sun came up on May 29, 2015, the streets already had their theories locked in, their suspects lined up, their own verdicts handed down. But the thing about Chicago in those years, and especially the North Side in that moment, was that truth and rumor moved in the same breath. Every name on every list had a reason to be there. Every crew had a motive. And every person in Pappy's circle had to look over their shoulder twice as hard, because if the man they called the face of PBG could get dropped in the middle of Uptown without warning, then anyone could. The cops had their statements, the media had their headlines, and the streets had their own version of events, but none of them matched perfectly. And that's the thing. In Chicago, especially in those days, the real story almost never came out in the open. It stayed where the bullets came from, the shadows. Pappy's murder sent a shockwave through Rogers Park, Uptown, and every set that had crossed paths with PBG. The grief inside his circle turned to rage almost immediately, and within days, the streets were already whispering about who was next. Friends, allies, and even loose associates began treating every Facebook status, every Instagram post, as a potential spark for bloodshed. The first major retaliation came just 4 days later, on June 2nd, 2015. Jermel Dossie, a known PBG affiliate, spotted 24-year-old Clifton Fry in Uptown. Fry had made what was seen as a disrespectful Facebook comment about Pappy's death, and in the tense, grief-fueled environment, that was enough to seal his fate. Witnesses later told police they heard Dossie confront Fry, and within seconds, shots rang out. Fry was hit multiple times and died at the scene. For PBG, this was framed as payback, a message to anyone thinking about mocking their loss online. The summer heat only made things worse. On July 17, 2015, the violence escalated again when PBG's Lil Sean targeted Valen Francis, a man believed to have ties to one of PBG's rival networks. Reports said Francis was standing outside with family when Sean approached. There was no argument, no long exchange, just gunfire in front of witnesses, including children. Francis died in his own neighborhood, and the brazenness of the killing cemented the idea that PBG wasn't interested in cooling down after Pappy's death. Other shootings rippled across the north side that year, each one linked in some way to the chain reaction set off by the Kenmore Avenue hit. Some were targeted strikes on known rivals, others were more chaotic, sparked by chance encounters at gas stations, bus stops, or corner stores. The names of crews like CVL, Lock City, and Hula Gang kept surfacing in connection to these incidents, but proving direct ties was nearly impossible. By late 2015 and into 2016, the Chicago Police Department made it clear they were treating PBG as a priority target. They already had files thick with social media screenshots, arrest records, and surveillance photos. But now they were stacking those files with fresh warrants and coordinated raids. Every arrest was another attempt to take a shooter off the street, and the department made no secret of their belief that removing key PBG figures could slow the violence. The pressure mounted year after year. By 2018, the combined toll of jail time, probation violations, and street killings had gutted PBG's core. Jermel Dossie was serving time for the Fry murder. Lil Sean was also locked up, facing a lengthy sentence for Francis's killing. Bang Da Hitta had dealt with his own legal troubles, and other recognizable names from the PBG videos had either relocated, been taken out in shootings, or fallen into the system. The once tight circle that had rallied around Pappy's music was fractured, spread out, and struggling to maintain the same presence. But the thing about these wars was that they rarely ended neatly. Even with so many key members gone, the grudges lived on. Younger affiliates took up the PBG name. Old beef simmered in online posts, and the street stayed alert for the next wave. For some, Pappy's death became a rallying point, a reason to keep the fight alive. For others, it was proof that staying in too deep for too long could only end one way. By the time the dust settled on those first few years after May 29th, 2015, the city had changed, but the cycle hadn't. Uptown and Rogers Park were still hotspots on the police map, and PBG's name still carried both respect and fear. Pappy was gone, but the war he left behind was still finding new soldiers to fight it. By 2018, the story of young Pappy had already crossed from street legend to cautionary tale, told in barbershops, back porches, and online forums. His music still lived on YouTube, tracks like Homicide and Shooters, racking up millions of views, serving as both an anthem for some and a grim reminder for others. Younger rappers in the Northside drill scene credited him for showing that Uptown and Rogers Park could have a voice in a movement often dominated by the South Side. Within PBG, his absence left a hole that was never fully filled. Budouble kept recording, dropping tracks that sometimes carried Pappy's unreleased verses, almost like keeping his voice alive in the booth. Lil Sean, after his own arrest, was remembered for his loyalty and the path he took after Pappy's death. For many of their friends, the years after 2015 felt like a slow fade, more funerals, more mugshots, fewer moments of celebration. Outside the circle, community leaders and even some former rivals admitted that Pappy's charisma could have taken him far if the streets hadn't kept him locked in a cycle. Chicago police still used his name when talking about how social media fueled violence, pointing to his online taunts as examples in community meetings. Yet among fans, he was remembered as someone who spoke exactly how he lived, with no filter, no disguise. Today, murals in Uptown and Rogers Park carry his face, painted alongside candles and tags that read, Pappy Gang. For the people who grew up with him, the story isn't just about how he died, but about the energy he brought every time he stepped into a room or a recording booth. That's the part of the legacy they want to keep alive.
What have you concurred?
Damn. I'm telling you, man, this social media is the most dangerous thing there is out there. Cause some people start out they're dissing and taunting enemies and all that. But man, shit. Rest in peace to Pappy, man. Like I heard a couple things that anybody mention their name, they'll be dealt with and they'd be unalive, bro. So his name was serious out there, man. But anyways, let me know what y'all think. Hit the comments, subscribe, all that good stuff. You already know. So EsseHomie. I'm out. Don't think about leaving without hitting the subscribe button. Hit that like button.